You are listening to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm Jeff Garvin.
And I'm Dan Zarzana.
Let the journey begin. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast, where we discuss your favorite stories through the lens of Joseph Campbell's monomyth, as well as Christopher Vogler's modern cinema-focused adaptation, as presented in his book, The Writer's Journey.
Most of the time we talk about heroes. Anti-heroes aren't always good, but they often do good by bringing down corrupt individuals or institutions. So to celebrate scoundrels who accidentally benefit others by cutting into the fat cats, we're looking at movies about con artists.
Placing third with a very disappointing 17% of the vote is The Score, the 2001 film directed by Frank Oz and written by Daniel E. Taylor, Cario Salem, Lem Dobbs, and Scott Marshall Smith. In second place, with 33% of the vote, is Ridley Scott's underappreciated 2003 film Matchstick Men, with screenplay by Nicholas Griffin and Ted Griffin, based on the novel by Eric Garcia. I love that movie.
Yes, I enjoy it as well, and I did not know it was based on a novel until I started researching this. And the winner of the poll with 50% of the vote is George Roy Hill's 1973 film The Sting, written by David S. Ward, making this the second David S. Ward picture we've covered. He also wrote and directed the baseball comedy Major League, which we analyzed last summer.
The Sting was released on Christmas Day in 1973 and earned $156 million globally against a $5.5 million budget. Wow.
Gangbusters at the time.
That is gangbusters. I get it. That's clever. It was the fourth highest grossing film in motion picture history at the time, behind The Exorcist, which was released the same week. Blows my mind that The Exorcist was such a lucrative film. Terrifying. Of course, I'm not a horror guy. At least it didn't have zombies. Anyway, the film stars some of the best talent 1970s Hollywood had to offer in Robert Redford, who was nominated for an Academy Award for his performance in this film, Paul Newman, and Robert Shaw, who's making his second appearance on this podcast, having also played the crusty sailor in Jaws, which we covered.
Right.
Great supporting roles were performed by Charles Durning, Eileen Brennan, Ray Walston, Harold Gould, Dana Elcar, Jack Kehoe, Demetra Arliss, and Robert Earl Jones, father of James, proving that Anakin Skywalker did, in fact, have a father.
Boom!
Mystery solved.
When I watched this and I saw that character smile,
yes,
I said, that dude's got to be related to James Earl Jones. They have the exact same smile. And
yes.
Then I looked up the credits, and it was Robert Earl Jones. I'm like, okay. The Sting was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning 7, so losing 3. Womp womp. Legendary Edith Head took home an Oscar for Best Costume Design. This was the 8th and final Academy Award win of her career. Just imagine, she said, dressing the 2 handsomest men in the world and then getting this. William Reynolds took home the Best Film Editing Award. Henry Bumstead and James W. Payne won for Best Art Direction, Set Direction.
I think that was a solid win. This movie, with the exception of a tiny hint of a anachronistic double yellow line in one corner of a shot, you are in 1930s Chicago. Composer Marvin Hamlish was honored with the award for Best Original Song, Score, and Adaptation. It should be stated that the song that everyone knows from this film is a ragtime piano piece called The Entertainer, written by Scott Joplin in 1902. Scott Joplin died in 1917 and was unavailable to accept an Academy Award in 1974, but because Hamlish's adaptation of Joplin's song reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Imagine this. It's 1974, and your song from 1902 suddenly hits the Billboard Hot 100 and the American Top 40, sliding in at number 3. It's Scotty Joplin with The Entertainer. So all of a sudden, everyone's noticing Scott Joplin. And then in 1976, Scott Joplin was awarded a posthumous Pulitzer Prize for his contributions to American music. David S. Ward won the Academy Award for Best Writing, Story, and Screenplay based on factual material or material not previously published or produced.
Say that 3 times fast.
Was there any room for that on the plaque? Like, David S. Ward.
I know. It's illegible. It just looks like Morse code underneath his name.
Yeah.
Director George Roy Hill took home top prize in his category over, get this, Jeff, Bernardo Bertolucci for The Last Tango in Paris, William Friedkin for The Exorcist, Ingmar Bergman for Cries and Whispers, and George Lucas for American Graffiti, another film we've covered here on the podcast. Go check that episode out. It was really fun. But dude, that is some top directorial talent.
Yeah.
It was the first and only Oscar George Roy Hill would win, although he was nominated 3 years earlier for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
And finally, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences bestowed upon The Sting the Best Picture of the Year, which was claimed by producers Tony Bill, Michael Phillips, and Julia Phillips, who was the first woman nominated and to win this award.
You can imagine what a trip this is for a Jewish girl from Great Neck. Tonight I get to win an Academy Award and meet Elizabeth Taylor all in the same moment. Thank you so much.
Okay, grifters, time to hustle. Identify your mark, stack the deck, and know your escape route. This is the hero's journey of The Sting.
Act 1 of the hero's journey begins with the world of common day. We see our main character in their status quo, normal life. The world of common day is approximately 97 minutes long in this film. So, Jeff, get
Yes.
comfortable.
Yes.
All right, we open on Joliet, Illinois, September 1936, the Great Depression. Director George Roy Hill shows us a city street littered with the broken husks of humanity. Contrasting that, we now see the fancy brogues of a well-dressed man as he enters a busy office, and by the dialogue, we can tell that this is some kind of an illegal operation. Not quite clear that it's mob-associated just yet, but it is. So the office boss hands our snappy dresser, whom we now know is named Mottola, an envelope containing $11,000 in cash. In 1936, $11,000 was roughly $250,000 in today's money.
That's a lot of dough.
This is a fat stack that this man was just handed. And he instructs Mottola to take this cash up to Chicago on the 4:15 train. So what this office does is collect the money from the mob operations in Joliet.
Right.
And then a numbers runner, which is what Mottola is, takes it up and hand delivers it to the main boss in Chicago. So Mottola leaves for the train, but he encounters a mugging in process in the alley as he's leaving. He hesitates to interfere, but a second bystander plays Good Samaritan. This is Johnny Hooker, played by Robert Redford, in his only, this surprised me, only Oscar-nominated performance.
Yeah.
He does have 2 Oscar noms for directing, Ordinary People and Quiz Show, but this is the only time he ever got nominated for an acting role.
Yeah, he was kind of seen as like a movie star, kind of like Tom Cruise. Although Tom Cruise got nominated for, I think, Magnolia, didn't he?
I don't know. You want to fact check yourself live on the air here while we
Yes.
while I continue reading
Yes,
here? All right.
I do.
So Johnny Hooker knocks the mugger down. Mottola retrieves the victim's wallet. The two of them, as the mugger flees, return the victim's wallet to him. The victim opens the wallet, pulls out a $100 bill, and Hooker sees the wallet is just jammed full of money. The victim explains that he's supposed to be delivering the cash to the mob by 4 o'clock, but the mugger stabbed him, so he can't walk, he can't make the drop. So he offers Johnny and Mottola $100 to deliver the cash for him. Johnny doesn't want to get involved with the mob, but Mottola is like, yeah, I'll do the job for you. So now Johnny demonstrates how Mottola should carry the cash because he sees Mottola sticking the cash into his pocket of his jacket. And Johnny says, no, you're going to get mugged if you keep it there. So he takes the money, the other money that Mottola's carrying, the $11,000 in cash.
Yeah.
And he shows him how to wrap it up in a kerchief and stick it down the front of your pants because no tough guy is going to search you there.
Yeah.
Then he pulls out the package, hands it back to Mottola. Off Mottola goes. Mottola gets into a cab, heads in the opposite direction of where the drop is supposed to go. This man is stealing this guy's money.
Yes.
No intention of making the drop. So as he is celebrating to the cab, he says, I just made the world's easiest $5,000. And he pulls out the package to admire a wad of tissue paper. Womp, womp. You just got had, dude.
Mm-hmm.
So now, like I said, it's a long sequence of events, but it does a great job of setting up what Johnny Hooker does. So Johnny Hooker and the victim, a man named Luther, this is played by Robert Earl Jones, hide in an alley together, see what they stole, and are stunned when they open this envelope.
Luther. Good God. We're millionaires.
Jesus, did you know I was that loaded?
Hell no, I just cut into him. I would have settled for pawning one of them shoes.
So they split up, agree to meet later that night to divide the take. Johnny goes on a spending spree, buys a new suit, dozen roses, a bottle of champagne, heads to a theater where a vaudeville show is going on. He asks the dancer on a date, promising to spend $50 on her. This is a lot of money back in 1936. And then he takes her to a speakeasy, drops $3,000 on red at the roulette table, and loses. And his date walks out on him.
Always bet on black.
Already he's lost everything. Now, we cut to a man in a maroon suit as he enters a rundown warehouse in the outskirts of Chicago to inform the boss what happened to Mottola. The boss calls, quote-unquote, the Big Mick in New York to deliver the bad news. The Big Mick is Irish gangster Doyle Lonigan, played by Robert Shaw. He instructs his bodyguard, Floyd, to have a couple of local people take care of it to discourage this kind of thing. And that is where I thought The World of Common Day concluded.
Boom. I think you covered it. That moves us to Call to Adventure, where the hero is presented with a challenge which renders them unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. Like the ordinary world, the Call to Adventure sequence is roughly 4 hours long, and it's multifaceted and it overlaps other elements of the story. So here I go. Johnny and Luther, like you said, rob Mottola, and they've unwittingly stolen from the Big Mick. This marks them both for retribution by Lonigan, setting off the major antagonist in the story. So this is one of those inciting events that sets off the story. Then Johnny gets the shakedown from the local detective in Joliet, Lieutenant Snyder, who knows Johnny just made a score and wants his cut. And then he also informs Johnny whom he's just robbed. And Johnny's like, oh, man. And then, in another great turn of judgment, Johnny attempts to pay part of his payoff to Snyder with counterfeit bills, setting off the secondary antagonist in the story.
Right.
So already in the first 20 minutes of this film, Johnny's just racking up enemies.
Yes.
Okay, so back at Luther's apartment, after you mentioned Johnny has blown his money, Johnny delivers his take to Luther and then admits that he blew his own take. And Luther admonishes him for being careless and then tells him, I'm getting out. I'm getting out of the game. I'm quitting. And you should stop wasting your time working street marks and level up to the big con.
I got an old friend in Chicago named Henry Gondorf. I want you to look him up. Bringing a better inside man alive. He'll teach you all you got to know.
Now, this is the affirmative call to adventure here, because this is Johnny's affirmative path of self-realizing himself as an elite grifter. And then finally...
that's the one that I honed in on.
Yeah, that's like the someone delivers the character an invitation.
Yes.
And then finally, Lonigan's men kill Luther. And this is the thing that renders Johnny unable to go on living in his ordinary world and sets him onto the path of revenge.
The next segment is refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, the call to adventure is refused by the hero directly, or sometimes external forces push back on the hero.
Mm-hmm.
After Luther tells Johnny that he's retiring and recommends he go to Chicago to work with Henry Gondorff. Johnny tells Luther, I don't want to go to Chicago. I want to stay here in Joliet and work with you. I guess that was the main refusal of the call, because the main call to adventure I saw was Luther telling Johnny to go to Chicago and work with Henry Gondorff. But I like these other elements that you've picked out. I have them in other sections, but I do like how they are also parts of a multifaceted call to adventure.
Yeah, that's what I have the same thing for refusal of the call. The other three elements I mentioned don't really have opportunities for refusal. They are just compelling incidents that drive him into the adventure.
Yeah.
That brings us to meeting with the mentor, where the hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. I think Luther provides a lot of mentorship in the scene that we also call the call to adventure, admonishing Johnny for his blowing of the thing and saying you have a bigger opportunity here. But this is a mentorship story. Like, the whole movie is a mentorship story. And I think the key mentor here is Henry Gondorff, whom we don't even meet until what I call the second
26 minutes of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So I'll tag lots of mentorship, and there's a lot of also mentorship by members of the gang that deliver crucial information. So that's kind of the mentorship happens throughout this movie rather than in a Obi-Wan scene.
We also should mention that the mugger at the beginning was actually part of the grift as well. His name is Joe Erie, or the Erie Kid, and this guy's played by Jack Kehoe. So he's part of the trio of Johnny, Erie, and Luther, and accompanies Johnny throughout the rest of this.
Yes.
I also included the crooked cop Snyder informing Johnny of who he just robbed.
Well, that's interesting.
As part of the meeting with the mentor, just kind of setting up what he has done. Basically just saying, boy, you done effed up.
Tell you what you did, smart boy. You tied into a loaded Mark on 47th across from Maxie's. And you and Coleman played the switch for him and blew him off to a cab on 49th. If he hadn't been a numbers runner for Doyle Lonigan, it would have been perfect.
If he didn't get that information from Snyder, he would have been whacked in the first act. So that's an interesting point.
As Johnny later tells Erie, he says Snyder never gets information first. So if he knows what we did, everybody knows what we did, and we need to run. So that's when he tries to call Luther. This brings us to crossing the first threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world. This crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. Johnny runs to Luther's apartment after he can't get him on the phone and finds that the apartment has been broken into and Luther has been murdered. So, Broke, his mentor dead, and Detective Snyder soon to be after him for passing the counterfeit bills to him, Johnny heads to Chicago to meet with Henry Gondorff and learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like his father.
Well said. Agreed.
He's pushed, really, across the threshold.
Yeah, he's there's that element of Campbell where he talks about the darkness of the special world encroaching on the hero's life, and I think that is present in this screenplay.
So that concludes Act 1 already. I feel like we got that through that kind of fast.
I'm surprised. I was scared. Yeah, it's less than 30 minutes of recording time, which is a record for us. I think the last episode we were recording Act 1 for an hour.
Well, yes, it was. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was a big, big, big Act 1. All right, well, then let us strut over to the side quest of the Campbell Cafe and talk about other things, other journeys we've undertaken since our last episode. Ladies and gentlemen, and Jazzy Jeff, welcome to the side quest at the Campbell Cafe, where Jeff and I pour ourselves a cup of Joe and discuss what else we've been up to, reading, watching, playing. So, Jeff, what you been doing?
I read The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. He has written for film and TV. He's written video games. And he's written lots of fiction. I met him at a writer's conference, 10 years ago, and really liked him. So I started reading his books. This book is really good, and it has major Stephen King feels. And so as I was reading it, I was like, oh, I've literally been dreading the loss of Stephen King, crossing my fingers that he stays around for a lot more time. But Chuck is carrying the torch in a major way in terms of, ghost stories and horror tales and the tales of the supernatural, but grounded in real characters who you love and relate to. Yeah, so if you're a fan of Stephen King, I highly recommend The Book of Accidents. Dan, how have you been chasing your bliss?
I did a variety of things, but I think the one thing that I need to mention is that, and this just happened yesterday, I saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And you don't want me to say anything about it, do you?
No, say what you want to say. I'm going to put my headphones down and walk away from it. No, go ahead. Say what you want to say and let the words fall out.
I just want to say that I was very pleased with it. I was not disappointed at all. I was
relieved.
Nervous after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because just the second half of that movie is awful. And I was terrified that that was going to be the conclusion of the Indiana Jones series. And then when I heard they were making a new one, but then that James Mangold was directing it, I thought, okay, because I haven't seen everything that Mangold has directed, but I've seen most of it, and I've enjoyed all of it.
3:10 to Yuma, we covered last year.
3:10 to Yuma, right. The Logan, his character conclusion for the Wolverine story for Marvel, I thought that was so well done, and the way it dealt with, in the same way that he has to deal with Indiana Jones in this film, is an aging hero who's tired. Yeah. He's too old for this S. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with being of that age and no one's interested in you anymore?
Yeah.
I thought they did a really great job. Maybe lagged a little in the middle. It's 2.5 hours long. But ultimately, the overall result was positive. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a great conclusion to the Indiana Jones series.
Oh, that's such a relief. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm leaving the country, so it's going to be a while before I see it because I'm going to see it with my whole extended family. So I just have to not be on the internet.
When you see it, I hope you do enjoy it. I think you will.
I'm pretty committed to enjoying it. I was committed to enjoying Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I wanted to love it so hard, and then I didn't.
Let's drain our cups here and head back over to our studio and get into Act 2 of The Sting.
Act 2 begins with tests, allies, enemies, the road of trials. Now in the special world, our hero makes allies, meets enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove his worthiness. 24 minutes in, we get a title card that announces the setup. I think this title card marks a solid transition into Act 2.
Yeah.
Some of the following title cards, though, didn't fit nicely into the framework. And I was really committed to having them fit into the framework. And so it took me a long time to let go of that. So among the allies, we have Luther, who croaks early in the film.
Wow.
And then,
wow, Jeff.
What?
Wow.
What?
Croaks.
Dies.
The disrespect.
Is murdered.
Yeah.
Henry Gondorf and his crew, Billy, Kid Twist, JJ, and the rest. And then FBI agent Polk, who is actually a fellow con artist / friend of Henry Gondorf, Hinky, who is a shapeshifter to us, but I think not to Johnny. I think Johnny is in on it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't 100% clear on that, and I was not a fan of that turn, but we'll take it when we get there. So enemies are Doyle Lonigan, the Big Mick, the banker who is actually a big book runner in Chicago. One of his henchmen, Floyd, who is played by Flea, making his second appearance on the podcast following his performance in The Big Lebowski. No?
I'm not following.
The actor who plays Floyd looks like Flea to me. So I'm watching it, I'm like, Yeah, he looks like Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I know who Flea is.
Oh, God.
He doesn't
All right.
look like... All right, I got to look him up.
That didn't go over the... I think his nose and his eyes and his mouth make him look like Flea. And then our other major enemy is Lieutenant Snyder, the Joliet detective who has it out for Johnny. There's one shapeshifter, Loretta, the lonely waitress who turns out to be Sereno, an assassin hired by Lonigan. That's all I have for major allies and enemies. Did I leave out anybody you think is...
The only other enemies I've got are Cole and Riley, the two hitmen that killed Luther and are also after Johnny Hooker.
That for sure they're worth mentioning.
That's it.
All right, tests. I think the first test, Johnny goes to Chicago and he gets past Billy the gatekeeper by invoking the name of Luther, who says, wait, are you Hooker? Why didn't you say so? It's such a great 19th... Why didn't you say so? Love that line. So that's a pass. And then I think the next test is that he manages to engage Henry to help him avenge Luther's murder by running the big con on Lonigan.
Right.
I think there's some evidence that Henry was already going to do it. Like, he doesn't need that much convincing, but I still think this is a test for Johnny.
I think Henry was already planning to take down Lonigan. It's just, does he want to let Johnny in on the con as well?
Yes.
That's what the test is.
Johnny discovers Henry passed out drunk and manages to roust him with a cold shower. We learn that Henry is no longer, quote, big time because he messed up big while conning Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida. We also learn that lop ear, which is a breed of rabbit my family kept as a pet when I was a kid, is slang for exceptionally stupid or gullible. I will now be folding lop ear into my vocabulary. Likewise, Shantuzi, he says... he was given away by some Shantuzi. And I was like, is that like a really bastardized Native American word? Or what is that?
Wow.
Turns out it is a travesty of an Americanized pronunciation of the French word chanteuse, which means singer, especially a female singer in a nightclub.
Aha.
Here we get some mentorship from Henry, who gives Johnny information on Lonigan. Says not only does he run numbers on the South Side and own banks and a packing house, he also owns half the politicians in Chicago and New York. And Johnny says, I'll get him anyway. Why? Because I don't know enough about killing to kill him. I loved that line.
Yep.
And I loved that insight into Johnny's psychology. That one line adds a layer to his character. Henry says you can't do it alone. You need a lot of guys and a lot of money, and he's someone to be feared.
Just don't want a hothead looking to get even coming back halfway through saying it ain't enough because it's all we're going to get.
Now that is another great line.
Yes.
That it's Henry laying out expectations. He's setting expectations for Johnny because he can tell Johnny really wants revenge. And at the end of that scene, we get a really great smile from Henry when Johnny says, you're going to do it, aren't you? You're going to go for him. So that's a big pass test.
Yes.
This next segment, I think, could really fit into Approach, but it's not time for Approach yet. So I'm going to plug it in here. We get a Montague of getting Johnny cleaned up and prepped for the con. The reason I saw this as possibly part of the Approach is there's that donning the armor for battle, and he's really getting suited up. He literally gets a new suit. He gets a haircut and a manicure, which he's resisting all of this. He doesn't want to he doesn't want to be messed with. And they start assembling their crew. So we meet JJ, played by Ray Walston, and Kid Twist, played by Harold Gould, and Eddie Niles, played by John Heverman. And we get some exposition, which could qualify as mentorship. I sort of keyed that in earlier. In the back of Billy's merry-go-round brothel. So she has this brothel that's above a big warehouse that has a merry-go-round in it for some reason. It's so... What an interesting setting. So in one of the back rooms, Niall gives a report on Doyle Lonigan. And he says the numbers game is Lonigan's biggest business. All the other stuff is just set dressing, trying to look legit. And we also learned that Lonigan tells people that he's from Forest Hills, but really he's from 5 Points, New York, making its second podcast appearance after its debut as the setting of Gangs of New York.
Very nice.
And that plays a key part in the con later on. Then JJ reports on Lonigan's movements and tells us that the numbers racket is run out of a packing house, but that Lonigan mostly stays away from it in case it gets raided.
Right.
Lonigan's had 7 or 8 people robbed on his way up.
His pattern has been to get close to a racket boss, learn the operation, then move in on it. He's done it to Gorman, O'Donnell, Buckelman. Took the numbers from Sharkey. All 4 of these guys are dead. He's vindictive as hell, Henry. Kills for pride. Doesn't add up. He let Hooker get away from him.
And then Henry looks at Hooker and says, if you see something, tell us, because if they grab you, it puts the whole con at risk. So already Hooker is lying to Henry because he has been pursued, but he doesn't want to give up this revenge plot. So he's trying to make it seem like everything's fine, no one's onto him. This is a test of Johnny's honesty, and he fails. But you can also see it as a failed test of loyalty. But Henry is wise, and he sees what Johnny is really after, and you can see him filing this information away, but I'm going to give him a longer leash to see what he can do. Then we have a test of the integrity of the crew. Snyder shows up at the brothel, and he tries to shake down Billy for information on Johnny. He's come from Joliet to Chicago. He has a Joliet badge, which Billy recognizes, but Billy outsmarts him and sends him away. She comes into the room with beers, and we see Billy whisper to Henry, and Henry looks at Johnny. And so now we know that Henry knows that Johnny passed counterfeit money. So now Henry's going, okay, there's something going on with Riley and Cole, and Johnny is passing counterfeit money, but he still lets him be part of the crew. In fact, taps him as second man.
Right.
On the mission that's about to happen. So finally, we learn that Lonigan's only weakness, like the only opening they have for a con, is that he plays poker and he cheats. And his regular game is on a train. And they decide that's where they're going to set him up. There are 2 more elements, but they come after this title card that says the hook. Uh-huh. And so I was like, I'm putting them in approach. So I originally had put them back in tests, but I'm cutting and pasting. I'm putting them in approach because it's just such a great dividing section. So that's where I cut tests.
All right, this brings us to approach to the inmost cave. The hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of their quest is hidden. The first element of the approach, I feel, is setting up the wire shop where they are going to run the big con. Kid Twist is in charge of this part of the operation, and while recruiting, he encounters Detective Snyder in I almost called it a speakeasy, but I think it's just a bar, because by this point, Prohibition has been disbanded. This takes place in 1936. Right. Prohibition ended in 1933, so this is just a bar. Kid Twist doesn't recognize Snyder, but he identifies him as a detective right away. And unfortunately, Kid Erie is sitting there at a table by the wall trying to really not very subtly hide his face behind his hand, and Snyder recognizes him, knows him from Joliet, wants to know where Hooker is, and Kid Erie's a smart ass. He says, he packed it up. He went to detective school. And for that, he gets a broken nose.
And I love this performance because you totally buy him as a minor crew guy who just can't quite keep his mouth shut. And when he does that smart-ass comment to Snyder, you can see it's like, I know I'm going to get hit for this, but I can't not say it. He's just so great.
Can't help himself. It's better to embarrass the cop and make everybody in the place laugh and take the broken nose in exchange.
Brutal.
The second part of the approach is prepping for the poker game on the train. Henry and Johnny conduct some recon in the train station. They identify Doyle Lonigan so they know who their mark is. Henry bribes the conductor to get him into the game. JJ provides intel on how Lonigan cheats. Billy pickpockets Doyle Lonigan, so he's got no cash.
Yeah, it's the old bump and grab.
Henry demonstrates some sleight of hand with a deck of cards, but then fumbles the shuffle, which really makes Johnny concerned. He's just cut to Johnny. He's got this bug-eyed. He's like, really, dude?
It's a great tension builder because you see it's a great moment of, this guy was great once, but now is he good enough?
Up? Right.
Is he good enough to pull this off?
And then Henry bathes in gin to reduce his threat and reputation at the table, make everybody think he's going to be an easy take.
He splashes gin
like
on
cologne.
his neck.
Yes.
Like cologne. Always use gin on a mark because they can't tell if you cut it.
Right. He dumps half the bottle into the sink and then fills it with water.
That's my beverage for this episode. I'm just going to splash gin on my neck and call it done. Watered down gin.
That, for me, was the approach to the Inmost Cave.
I guess the poker game is your ordeal then?
The poker game and immediately following when it's, Johnny has to convince Lonigan.
Interesting. So that was my original ordeal as well.
Great. Go with that because it's correct.
But I changed my ordeal.
Nope.
So the poker game is in my approach. In fact, to me, the poker game is the main approach because it is the hook that leads them into the big risk where Johnny faces death. So in the poker game, Henry enters the game pretending to be drunk and obnoxious.
Sorry I'm late, guys. I was taking a crap.
The game is a great poker sequence. But at the end, when Doyle reluctantly goes to pay him off, he reaches for his wallet and finds that it's gone. So now he's humiliated.
Yeah.
Because not only has he lost to this man, but his money is gone, and he is just steaming up, and Henry is leaning into him and pushing him and taunting him, and you're just like, oh my God.
Must have left my wallet in my room.
Don't hand me into that crap. When you come to a game like this, you bring your money. How do I know you won't take a powder?
No, not
All right, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send a boy around to your room in 5 minutes. You better have the money or it's going to be all around Chicago that you're welched. You won't be able to get a game of jacks.
Then Henry sends Johnny, with the alias Kelly, into Lonigan's room to collect the winnings. And he tells a version of the truth. He says that Henry, a.k.a. Shaw, which is ironic because the guy playing Lonigan's name is Shaw,
Yeah.
that he cheated and that he's been planning to beat him for months. And Lonigan is apoplectic. And Johnny tells Lonigan that he needs Lonigan's help to take over Shaw's organization. This is the hook in the sting. Johnny rides home with Lonigan in the car and persuades him to help take Shaw down.
I've been planning this for 2 years. I know his organization backwards and forwards, and I need somebody who's respectable, but not completely legit.
I'm a banker, Kelly. That's legit in the state.
Well, all you gotta do is put down a bet for me at Shaw's place. I'll do the rest. I'll supply the money, I'll supply the information.
And Lonigan asks Johnny, where are you from? And in a very nice bit of conning, Johnny says, I'm from 5 Points, but I got out of there. And there's this little smile. It's a great performance by Shaw, this little smile on Lonigan's face. Like maybe he sees a little bit of himself in Johnny, an Irish kid from 5 Points who's getting up and out and getting in the con game. So you just see that needle get stuck into Lonigan. And finally, in the last bit of the approach to this inmost cave, Johnny tells Lonigan, meet me at Klein's drugstore at 1:30 if you're interested.
If I'm not there by 1:45, I'm not coming.
The penultimate section of Act 2 is Ordeal. The hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fear, sometimes actually appearing to die. Johnny survives an assassination attempt. This is a direct hero faces death. The moment he gets home, so at the beginning of the movie, Johnny had slipped a piece of paper into his door so that he would know if anyone had entered his apartment. So he gets to his apartment door and he sees that little piece of paper is no longer lodged in the door jamb. And he knows that something's wrong. He turns just in time to avoid a bullet as a mysterious figure tries to shoot him. And then two dudes give chase. These are Riley and Cole, the two henchmen who killed Luther and were supposed to kill Johnny at the beginning of the film. But Johnny escapes by hiding on the side of a Zamboni. Very exciting and clever. At the fake gambling parlor, Henry says, hey, what's wrong? And Johnny lies and says, oh, there's no problem. Again, doesn't want to pull the plug on this con because he's committed to revenge. So here's the face-off. Lonigan shows up at Klein's drugstore, and Johnny says, answer the phone in 2 minutes. You're going to get a tip on a horse to bet on, and he gives him $2,000 to place a bet. The operation has never been so exposed because Lonigan is now entering the lion's den, and so is Johnny because he's invited Lonigan into this fake betting environment. So he agrees, he takes the tip on the phone, he shows up at the betting parlor, which, by the way, what a setup. That place looks 100% real.
Yes.
I just like how much money and how many guys, like what an expensive sting that they had to raise the money to do all this. So incredible. And I loved it. Lonergan shows up, and then there's Henry comes out of the office. Henry goes right into taunting him. Like, oh, this is a guy who doesn't, he welches on his bets and makes sure you count the cash. And Lonergan is just, this. You can see the steam rising off out of his scalp. So he places the bet. And then in the back, JJ's calling the horse race, and you can just see Lonergan like gritting his teeth, waiting to see what happens. And of course, his horse wins the race.
Lady High Gloss, Blue Note, Lady High Gloss, Blue Note, and Blue Note wins it by a nose. Lady High Gloss is second by 3.
Henry tells Lonergan to get his goons out and not bring him back. He doesn't want the bodyguards there when they pulled the final sting. And then he makes a show of treating Kelly, a.k.a. Johnny, poorly, further setting up their relationship. I can see why you chose the poker game, but I chose this because this is the most dangerous point in the story so far. To me, the hook is a setup for this moment. If the hook goes bad, the stakes aren't as high as if this goes wrong. So that's why I chose this as the ordeal.
The reason I had the poker game as the ordeal is you're stealing from the dragon, from his lair. And this train, or at least this poker car in the train, is Lonergan's. This is as close to Lonergan's lair as we get. And they are at big risk breaking into this game and cheating the cheater.
I can totally see that. In my mind, I had to choose between the poker game and the betting parlor con, but I can appreciate putting them together, especially because the poker game might be Henry's ordeal.
It certainly is. And the reason I've got all of this collected as one single ordeal is because it is all part of the hook. They make the guy owe them money from the poker game, but then Johnny tricks Lonergan into thinking that he wants to take down Mr. Shaw and gives him a way to do it. And as we know from what JJ said in the brothel during their initial meeting, what Lonergan does is he gets close to a racket boss, learns their operation, kills them, and takes over the business. And so that's what they're trying to bait Lonergan into doing here.
Yes.
That's why all of that was ordeal for me. That brings us to the reward. Having faced their worst fear, the hero seizes the object of their quest. So the reward here is successfully interesting Lonergan. They hook the big fish.
Yeah.
Fun fact, when Kid Twist calls the drugstore with the hot tip on the horse, he says, Blue Note to win in the 4th race at Narragansett. He says this to Robert Shaw. Robert Shaw was in Jaws, and his beer of choice was Narragansett.
Oh my God. What a great connection. I had not picked that up.
That's the reward from my perspective. Any other elements of the ultimate boon?
That works for me.
Then, I believe it is time for us to grab an adult beverage at the Vogler Lounge.
Yes.
I hope you will join me there. Hopefully Detective Snyder won't be there to pour our drinks over our hand like he does to Billy.
That's right. Dan, welcome to the Vogler Lounge, where we enjoy a themed beverage based on the episode we are recording. What you got? Or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first
Okay.
because it sounds like you've got something a little more involved than I do, and that might be a little more interesting. So on the train during the poker game, as we discussed, Henry uses gin as a cologne.
Yeah.
And drinks it during the game while he's acting drunk. The gin that he is drinking is the original Gordon's London Dry Gin, and fortunately, it is still being made. So I found a bottle of that.
Oh, look at that. The bottle hasn't changed much.
Unfortunately, the only size I could find was a 1.75 liter bottle, so I'm going to have to get good at drinking gin real quick here.
Yeah.
Gin is not something that I drink often. It is, for me, something more that I will have in a cocktail rather than drinking it straight. However, straight is how Henry Gondorf drinks it during the poker game.
Oh, boy.
And so I have myself a little glass
That's water.
of Gordon's London Dry Gin.
He's drinking water.
It does look like it. That way my mark can't tell if I cut it.
Oh.
It definitely smells like gin. What
did you expect?
Sometimes don't. Well, I'm just saying it's not my favorite.
Is it like floral or medicinal or?
The juniper is really strong, but it's almost too sharp. It's too much for me.
Yeah.
Really aggressive, the scent. And like I said, I don't drink gin, so I don't know if this is the case for all gins. Does this just smell like a regular gin?
Right.
Or is this one really really high powered? It is 40% alcohol, so 80 proof, so just like a basic whiskey.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a sip, see what this stuff tastes like. Not something that I think I will have as a nightcap. This is definitely a cocktail mixer. I'll stick with whiskey. It's a shame that this is a 1.75 liter bottle. Definitely going to be making some gin cocktails for the next foreseeable future. Fortunately, it was cheap. I think this bottle was less than $25.
Not top shelf, you're telling me?
So, well, I mean, here's the bottle.
Jeez.
It's plastic. I'm drinking gin out of a plastic bottle.
That is, well.
So, yeah, that's what I've got. So, I would love to hear from some gin drinkers. Is what I just had good gin? Or is everybody going to say like, oh, God, I mean, Gordon's is it might be the world's best-selling gin, but it's bottom shelf.
Our patron, Melanie Nelson, is a gin connoisseur.
Oh,
and she gifted us a bottle. Sorry, I hate the word gifted. She gave us a bottle of strawberry infused gin that was delicious. There's all different kinds of gin, so maybe she can comment on the gin drinking. I'm sure she will tell you that Gordon's is the Pabst Blue Ribbon of gins.
I mean, it literally was on the bottom shelf at the grocery store. So
half-gallon jug.
Basically. So what do you have, Jeff?
Across from the diner where Johnny eats underwhelming meatloaf and meets Loretta, there is a billboard advertising Ezra Brooks bourbon. Ezra Brooks is still making bourbon, but the only bottle I could find is Ezra Brooks Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey 99 proof.
Whoa.
Okay. So
almost 50% alcohol.
I feel like he would drink it straight, but
oh, of course he would.
I made myself an old fashioned because this is an old fashioned.
Okay.
Movie. But just to have cojones, I poured myself a half-ounce pour.
Okay.
So I could drink it straight, even though it's 99 proof. It is in the glass. It's apple juice, maybe a little bit darker than apple juice. It leaves a healthy residue when you tip the glass.
I imagine.
Not as strong an ethanol smell as I would have expected.
Okay.
I smell almost a sweetness and then, something leathery or tobacco-y, like something very flat and natural smelling, but not sharp. It's like a very mellow scent.
Okay.
All right, here we Oh, that time I got...
Got your nose a little too far in there, huh?
All right, here we go. That is... wow.
Involuntary reaction happening right now on camera.
My eyes are watering.
His head's twitching.
That is delicious on the front end and just lighter fluid on the back end.
Oh, wow.
Absolute. The taste left in my mouth is like the dregs of too hot coffee. You burned your tongue, and it's the bitter. This is awful on the back end. It's delicious on the front end, though. I'm going to take the last sip of this. Delicious until you swallow. So now I'll drink my old-fashioned. As you know, I like my old-fashions with bourbon and not too sweet. So this is 2 ounces of bourbon, half a teaspoon of simple syrup, which is half the recipe.
Okay.
3 dashes of Angostura bitters, 1 cherry. I didn't use Luxardo this time. I have Woodford Reserve bourbon cherries.
Ooh.
And then a twist of orange. Here we go. That is a much more palatable way to drink this whiskey.
Okay.
But still very aggressive. I might have used because I don't like my old fashions too sweet, but with this one I might have used a full teaspoon of simple syrup to cut the astringent death grip that this whiskey is maintaining on my tongue. Wow.
So because of the high alcohol content of that whiskey, I wonder if you were going to drink it neat, if it would benefit from a couple drops of water or even full rock.
I would put a rock in it and let it sit for 3 or 4 minutes before I drank it.
You should try that just for science, and not right now, but before you finish that bottle, give both of those methods a try, just so you can see how that particular whiskey behaves with first a couple of drops of water and then just put a full rock in there and see how the whiskey changes.
I will do that. My head is hot. My face is red. I feel like I'm going to burp.
You're going to blow fire is what you're going to do.
Very, very strong.
All right. So you're definitely going to stumble back to the studio. I've barely sipped
After
this.
After 2.5 ounces of 99 proof whiskey, you're damn right I'm going to stumble. Act 3 begins with a road back, where the hero is pursued by vengeful forces they disturbed when they seized the object of their quest. Lonergan grills Johnny/Kelly about his system for winning, for fixing the horse race, and correctly guesses that he is past posting, where you get the results before everyone else and bet based on those. This is obviously before satellite television was a thing.
Oh, yeah, not possible today.
Right. Johnny plays it off like he's disappointed and surprised Lonergan figured it out. And I love Robert Redford's performance in this moment because he's pretending to be a guy pretending to be disappointed, and you read all of that in this moment. So he tells Lonergan he's got a partner at the Western Union office who tips him off before he sends the results to the other bookies. Lonergan gives Johnny $1,000 and says, make another bet tomorrow, and then demands to meet the partner at Western Union, which immediately puts, wow, it's already happening, which immediately puts Henry and the gang on the defense, forcing them to hastily set up another con. So Lonergan is taking control and now driving the rest of this con. Just after Johnny finishes calling Twist to say, hey, we got to figure this out. And Twist is very blasé. He's like, all right, well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out a con. He's like so smooth.
Kid Twist is my favorite of the team.
Twist?
I liked Kid Twist, yeah.
Yeah,
his style and
he's like the Uncle Con man.
How calm he is about everything, and
yeah, he's like the uncle who would show you how to steal beer from the liquor store or something. He's just so friendly and clearly enjoys the life of crime. Immediately after this phone call, Snyder jams his revolver through the glass of the phone booth and sticks it right against Johnny's head, causing a contusion. And Johnny manages to burst out of the phone booth, and a chase ensues. It's my favorite chase. There's a lot of chases in this movie, but this is my favorite one. Through the streets of Chicago, into a train station, onto the roof of like the shelter of the train station, and back down. And it's all set to ragtime music. So it's got this comic effect. David S. Ward imagined this as a very dark, heavy movie. And the director said, no, we're going to put a comical twist on this. And I loved this sequence. To me, it really captures the essence of the tone of this movie. Back at Henry's, Johnny can no longer fake his way through the lies that he's been telling. He can't explain away the mark on his face. So he's forced to tell Henry that Snyder's been after him. And Henry admonishes him, you put the whole con at risk. He says, what else is going on? Now, this is an opportunity for you to come clean about Lonergan's goons trying to kill him, but he doesn't.
Right.
Johnny is admirable within the context of the movie because he's so committed to revenging Luther. And his love and respect for Luther is something we can deeply relate to and that we like Johnny for. We like him. And if you think about the context of this movie in the 30s, right, Luther is a black man, and he even says, I can't be a big con because no one would trust a black man enough to be conned by him. He puts it in much rougher terms that we could never say on this podcast. And then if you think about the context of this movie when it was made in 1973, the civil rights movement was still much more in combat than it was now. Combat's the wrong word, but Johnny treats Luther like a family member, doesn't treat him like a lesser person. And so that friendship in the 30s would have been controversial, and maybe even in 73 would have been considered very progressive. So he's in some ways a progressive hero, right? Because he values everyone's lives the same. That's something that we really like. So we forgive him lying to Henry because we believe in him. We want Luther to be avenged. So now we get a title card, The Wire. At the diner, Johnny orders a blue plate special from a new waitress, Loretta. She's not like other girls. And the plate isn't even blue. I just want to point that out. So next we get the Western Union scam. Twist and JJ show up at a real Western Union office because they haven't had time to fake one, right? And they pose as painters, and they temporarily eject the manager from his office just as Johnny rolls up with Lonigan and Floyd. Lonigan steps into the office long enough to see the family picture with Twist in it and hear him address his secretary over the intercom, and he's still suspicious, but he appears to buy it. He appears to go, okay, this is a real lead. And then Twist rushes him out of the office. That's getting painted. We can't talk here. We have to go somewhere else. But Lonigan demands another test before he'll go full Monty. He wants another bet at $15,000, but he agrees to short odds. Next up, this is the one element of this movie I do not like, which is the sting of Agent Polk. So Snyder gets hauled in by what we are told are FBI agents, where he meets Agent Polk, and he wants Snyder to go pick up Johnny Hooker so they can turn him against Gondorf to catch Gondorf in the act. And this bothered me because now we're not seeing the bad guys get conned, we the audience are conned. And this is the only part of the movie that breaks away, and I don't like that they relied on this twist at the end of the movie because it's not really a twist. They kept information from us, the audience. I don't like these cheats. Now, it's still a great screenplay, and this is a very significant part of the plot, but I just wanted to put a flag. I don't like that stuff. I don't like when I get hornswoggled by the screenplay. I like to feel like you're giving me all the information and it's still a great twist. Do you know what I mean?
You didn't have this problem with The Sixth Sense. That entire movie, the truth is withheld from you. The whole point is that, haha, I fooled you, audience.
Yes, but it's not a movie about a confidence game where we're in on the con. We are with the main character who also doesn't know that he's dead. So we're seeing what our main character sees and understands the whole time. And the brilliance of it is that we know everything the main character knows, and it's still an incredible twist from the beginning. This is, we know almost everything that the main character knows except this one thing that ends up being crucial to the twist at the end of the movie. So I see those as very different choices, and it bothered me. But
wow,
it's a device that's used in this movie, and it is what it is.
Jazzy Jeff doesn't like being tricked, everybody.
I just think it cheapens the twist. That's all.
That's all.
We get another title card, The Shutout, which I read the first 2 times I watched this movie as the shout out. And I could not understand for the life of me how this was a shout out. Why did my brain see that? What an idiot.
I don't know, man. That's funny.
So now we come to the second test of the betting system. At the fake betting parlor, Henry is hoping that he's going to place a bet with short odds because paying off big odds on a $15,000 bet could break this fake operation. So they decide they can't risk it, and they plan for a shutout. So Lonigan arrives, and they stall him long enough so that he can't get the bet in before the race starts.
Yeah.
But his horse, the horse he was going to bet on, still wins. So the ruse works. Even though he couldn't get the bet in and make the money, he says, all right, well, clearly the system's working. And he says, I'll have $500,000 here by post time tomorrow. Yes.
$500,000.
$500,000.
I mean, you're dealing first $2,000, then $15,000. $500,000 is the next bet. That's massive.
Let's look up how much $500,000 in 1936 money.
Yeah. Remember, 11,000 was $250,000 in today's value.
It would be $10.9 million.
That's incredible.
Just
in cash.
So the stakes, you can't conceive of the stakes when you hear $500,000. I mean, $500,000 is a huge bet, but $10 million.
In today's money, that sounds amazing, but
right.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, then we have another assassination attempt. Johnny's at the diner. He hits on Loretta, but she rebuffs him. And then he spots a man waiting outside the diner, and he enlists Loretta to help him escape, more or less coerces her into helping him. So he goes out the front and baits the bad guy, who comes in after him, and then he hides in the bathroom stall with Loretta so that when the bad guy comes in, he can see her legs in the stall, and she's occupied when he tries to get in. And then he takes the bait and goes out the open window. Johnny runs out the front, and the bad guy's waiting for him again, so he has to double back and flee, but he gets away. I'm so dim. It took me a long time to figure out that this is Cole, the one of Lonigan's henchmen who failed and took it hard. So not only is he still trying to prove himself to Lonigan, he's got a personal vendetta against Johnny because Johnny escaping tarnished his reputation in the organization.
Right. And the fact that Lonigan has resorted to higher-priced talent to eliminate Johnny diminishes Cole and Riley's reputations.
Right.
Even though they were local, they're Joliet, Illinois hitmen, not Chicago.
Yeah.
But he has overstepped his bounds and come to Chicago still hunting Johnny Hooker.
He was sent off the job, and he still pursues it, which is why he pays with his life, because he turns around in the alley, and we don't see what he sees, but he says he identifies this unknown person as Celino, and then he takes a bullet and dies. So this twist I like because Celino is a mystery. And we don't see Celino, so we're already curious who Celino is. We've already established Loretta, so when we find out they're the same one later, totally honest twist. We assume Celino is a man because we're a bunch of sexist MFers. Okay, so now, Vengeful Force Snyder. Having been tipped off by fake FBI agent, Johnny gets home and is greeted by Snyder, who puts a gun to his head and drags him to the warehouse where the fake FBI has set up their office. And Polk offers to let him go free if he'll give up Henry, if he'll help them catch Henry in the act. He refuses. Then Agent Polk threatens to go arrest Luther's widow if he won't go along with it. And this is when he folds and agrees to help the FBI under the condition that they wait to make the arrest until after he's completed the con on Lonigan. So at this point in the movie, we're supposed to believe that Agent Polk is real and that he's coercing Johnny into giving up Henry. We buy it because we've seen Johnny lie to Henry at multiple points and value his vengeance over his relationship with Henry. So we buy it at this point.
Yeah, and we haven't seen Agent Polk yet. I mean, we haven't seen him with the other con men before, so that we don't go, oh, wait, he's a con man too.
Right.
We think that this is actually an FBI agent.
Yep.
And that's what Jeffy doesn't like, because Jeffy doesn't like being tricked, see?
I don't like it, see? So now we're preparing for the final face-off. The night before, Johnny and Henry are playing cribbage. Johnny seems guilty as hell, and Henry asks him, hey, what's up? And he says he's just got the jumps. He also says, you know I wouldn't have asked you to do this if it wasn't for Luther. And Henry says, nothing's going to make up for Luther. You're not going to get revenge. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I never got any. And then Johnny asks him, well, then why are you doing this? And he says, seems worthwhile, don't you think? So Johnny looks very guilty. And I think we're supposed to think that Johnny was hoping that Henry was doing this for Luther and would therefore forgive him when he finds out eventually that Johnny betrayed him to save Luther's widow. But of course, we find out that's not the case. So this is, to me, part of the cheat. But I suppose you could justify the way he's behaving as just anxiety about the big con. But I think this is just, it's part of the con on the audience. So I don't like it. But I do like the next scene, which is Johnny leaving through the carousel, and Billy has opened up the carousel because all the hookers want to ride the carousel. So he walks past the carousel.
It's a slow night, apparently.
All the hookers are like waving to him. Like, let's infantilize women. So I want to open up the carousel because the girl, it's a slow night and the girls want to ride it. Like, I just thought it's very funny that all the hookers are waving to him, but also like maybe not woke. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I think the point of that is to remind us of Johnny Hooker's appeal.
That's an interesting thought.
Because next he goes to Loretta, and Loretta immediately... Loretta does not rebuff him this time. Loretta lets him in.
That's an interesting take. I don't know that anyone needs reminding that the ladies love Robert Redford. But you're right. So the last part of the road back, he goes to visit Loretta at her apartment next to the diner, and you see another shot of the Ezra Brooks bourbon billboard in that scene. It's the middle of the night, and after an adequate quantity of protest, she lets him in, and they spend the night together. And that is where I drew the line of the road back.
Oh, okay. See, I struggled with this draw as well.
It's because of the title card. There are a couple things that could still fit in, but I was like, title card, the Sting.
Yeah, I get you.
It's like it might as well say the resurrection. But
yeah, but there's a couple of moments that occur. Okay, so
I agree. These next two things you're about to say, I totally agree. It should be part of the road back.
Okay, so continuing the road back from my perspective, Johnny wakes up alone in Loretta's bed. He goes to the diner. She's not there. He gets dressed in his tuxedo for the big con. Then he calls Agent Polk, tells him there'll be a couple of guards at the door, but nobody carries a gun, so it's not going to be any trouble for you. Mm-hmm. And he walks down the alley to the fake betting place, and he sees Loretta pop out of an alley ahead of him, start walking towards him. She's got a little grin on her face. Suddenly, we see a man with a gun appear over Johnny's shoulder, draw a silenced pistol, and of course, we think he's about to cap Johnny.
Cap, there you go. Now you're on board with Cap. He's about to pop a cap in Johnny.
In this case, it's appropriate. You say Cap in the weirdest places. In this case, this is a gangster shooting a hitman. This is popping a cap. So he pops a cap right in Loretta's forehead and runs up to her, rolls her body over, and we see in her hand, she too has a silenced pistol. He says,
"She was going to kill you, kid. Her name's Loretta Salino. Lanigan's people set her up in the diner. Come on, let's get out of here. Come on!"
This is the revelation of who this guy is, and we've seen glimpses of him throughout the second act.
Yeah, the black-gloved gunman.
Yeah, every now and then you'll see Johnny will be walking down a street and the camera will pass by a car, and there's somebody with this maroon striped suit on with a black leather glove with his hand on the steering wheel, and you're like, ooh, that's got Hitman written all over it.
Right. That's Salino.
And then you see that figure. Yeah, you think it's Salino, and you see that figure multiple times throughout.
Yeah, and that's a great twist because you've given us information and we've made faulty assumptions. Mm-hmm. And then you show us that those assumptions are wrong, but you never falsified facts or made us accept things that weren't true. We never see his face. We never hear him called Salino. It's never set up.
Yeah.
So that to me is a great twist. When that bullet hits Loretta in the forehead, I was shocked. But that was a great surprise. And of course, immediately you go, oh, she was Salino.
The reason I put that in Road Back versus Resurrection is because Salino had been hired an hour ago to kill.
It's clearly vengeful forces, obviously. Yeah. So of course it belongs in the Road Back. I just like the title card.
I wrestled with that so much because I thought if this bodyguard, and he says Henry hired me to watch over you.
Right.
So that is really, it's a resurrection of Johnny. Had he not been there, Salino would have killed Johnny, game over. So it is a resurrection of Johnny, but for me it fits better in...
I've changed my mind again after your last comment. You rechanged my mind.
Oh, you think it's resurrection?
Yeah, it's a really good point that it's a moment where he would have died.
Yeah.
Look, I'm really committed to the title cards.
That's what the Road Back is.
I'm unreasonably committed to the title cards. That's all this is about, because I think you're right about that
really
being part of the Road Back.
Yeah.
Oh, David S. Ward, am I wrong? Tweet me. @Heroes Podcast.
Resurrection, or Master of Two Worlds. The hero faces death one more time. That's why this Salino encounter is in Road Back, not Resurrection, because he faces death one more time.
That's
not
right.
two more times.
Not twice more.
In a final battle or showdown. This time, the danger is at the apex. We have a title card. I haven't mentioned title cards once yet. You have been on the title cards like a duck on a June bug. The Sting. Lonigan waits at Klein's pharmacy. The phone rings. The voice on the other end, Kid Twist, my favorite, tells Lonigan,
Yeah.
Place it on Lucky Dan, third race at Riverside Park.
Lucky Dan. Yes, I have a con man nickname. I am Lucky Dan.
Horse's name, though.
That's why I've been calling you Jazzy Jeff.
You have a
third
horse
race
name.
At we named the horse Indiana. Third race at Riverside Park. So Lonigan stuns everyone in the betting parlor by dropping $500,000 on Lucky Dan to win. The cashier calls the boss, Mr. Shaw, over. Shaw agrees to take the bet at 4-1 odds.
But only after Lonigan calls him a gutless cheat.
And a coward.
Yeah.
So Mr. Shaw agrees to take the bet at 4-1. If this works in Lonigan's favor, he's going to bring in $2 million, which, based on the figure you just looked up, would be more than $40 million in today's money on one horse.
I wonder if the studio ever pushed back on those dollar amounts and said they're ridiculous.
No.
I guess what I'm saying is in 36, is it even reasonable that someone would bet $10 million on a horse? Probably not, but you had to make the numbers.
How do you know? Come on. The fat cats are always going to play with their money, regardless of whether there's a depression on or not. Look at what's going on with today with the wealthiest people in the world. Lonigan was one of those people in that time.
I guess what I'm trying to say is when you write the dollar amounts into the script, you have to account for the fact that people in 1973 are not doing inflation math. So if you'd had the numbers lower, the stakes wouldn't have been as high. That's what I'm trying to say.
$6 on Lucky Dan to win. Yeah, you're right. That's a flaccid bet. Who cares?
Yeah,
Who cares if Lonigan wins or loses?
Flaccid bet. That's your gangster name.
That's my Connor. Flaccid bet.
Oh, that's over.
I hate you forever now.
I hate me too.
Because that's what's going to stick. No one's going to remember Lucky Dan. They're going to think Flaccid Bet. That's going to be my gangster name.
You said it.
That's it.
I didn't bring it up.
I'm cutting you from every Mech Warrior episode from now on in No Games for Old Men. You are no longer a part of that channel.
I have been fired from 2 of my online jobs. Okay.
All right. So Kid Twist then arrives at the betting parlor in his Lester the Western Union tipster disguise.
Right.
And sits next to Lonigan. And Lonigan tells him, everything's in order. I've placed $500,000 on Lucky Dan to win. And Lester says,
Into the bar, it's Lucky Dan, still a link. Dr. Twinkle Nash.
Said place. Place it on Lucky. That horse is gonna run second.
which is a trick of language because we heard the phone call. And he says, place it.
Yeah.
It being the bet on Lucky Dan. So anyway, so Lonigan panics, rushes to the cashier. The race has already started.
Yeah.
He rushes to the cashier, says, I made a mistake. I need my money back. Just as the FBI and Detective Snyder bust in to shut the joint down, Polk then, as everybody's got their hands up, Polk then approaches Johnny and Henry and says, Johnny, you can go free. Thanks for helping us out here.
Right.
Henry pulls a gun, shoots Johnny dead. Polk shoots Henry dead. Polk orders Snyder to get Lonigan out of there because he's a big fish. We don't want him here when the police, the local police, because Polk has said we're trying to do this without local police involvement, or the news media, most importantly. We don't want them showing up while Lonigan is still here because that will be bad.
Right.
Snyder gets Lonigan out of there. Lonigan protesting the entire time. I've got $500,000 in there. And Snyder says, there's also 2 dead bodies. You cannot be here when the media shows up. We got to get you out of here. That's the final battle.
Well, that brings us to Return with the Elixir, or Freedom to Live. The hero having won some precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. Back inside, Polk tells Johnny he's gone. And Johnny and Henry both stand up. They were faking their deaths. So now we understand that thing that Robert Redford was playing with by the drawer and like biting with his teeth was a blood capsule.
Yeah.
And Henry says, "Nice con, Hickey. I thought you were the feds myself." The sting is over. They won. And Henry approaches Johnny and says, "Well, kid, you beat him." Johnny says, "You're right, Henry. It's not enough. But it's close." And they laugh.
Yeah.
Henry gives props to JJ and a hug to Billy. And then as he's getting close to the exit, he says, "You're not going to stick around." He says to Johnny, "You're not going to stick around for your share?" And Johnny says, "Nah, I'd only blow it." And then Robert Redford does such a great acting choice as he kind of looks around the room. It's not necessarily something you would naturally do, because I don't know that he's particularly emotionally involved in the environment, but it indicates to the audience that this is the end, that he's remembering the moment, that he's putting this in a little box. And then with a nose swipe to Eerie Kid, which is something they've been doing since the beginning of the movie, laying a finger aside of their nose, Santa Claus style. You hear the opening piano of The Entertainer, and Johnny loses the fedora in favor of his driving cap that he was wearing at the beginning, returning to the ordinary world here.
Nicely done.
And he and Henry walk away down the alley, and we iris into black. That's it, Lucky Dan. The mark has been grifted, and we've gotten off scot-free. What are you going to do with your share?
You keep it, Jazzy Jeff. I'd only blow it on whiskey and video games.
You probably would. Listeners and patrons, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Please stop right now and share us with text a friend, share us with your family. We want more listeners.
Like and subscribe, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. I specify Apple Podcasts because I have not found a single other app that allows you to rate and review.
Yeah.
If you know of one, please let us know. We'll pimp them too. You can find The Hero's Journey on Audible. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit patreon.com/Hero's Journey Podcast. And see if one of the available tiers appeals to you.
And now I'm going to thank all of our patrons, and I'm going to go romper room style for the demigods. John Peterson Jr., Scott Sanford, Ricky Garvin, Jeff Scott, Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ami Garvin, Salathiel Jones, Jasmine and Pete Hudson, Mike and Susie Zarzana, and Randy Sparks.
Thank you also to Taylor Jordan for composing the Hero's Journey podcast theme music. Thank you to artist Jason Dorff for our episode artwork. Links to their portfolios can be found on the About page of heroesjourneypodcast.com. The trademark Hero's Journey is used under license from Joseph Campbell Foundation. Visit www.jcf.org to learn about how the foundation promotes and celebrates the work of Joseph Campbell.
The Sting is copyright 1973 Universal Pictures. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
Journey on.
Luther said I could learn something from you. I already know how to drink.